Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined by Andrew Erickson. We are talking Week 11 wide receiver buys and sells. If you missed the running back version of this episode, it is already available on YouTube and on audio wherever you get your podcasts. We talked some running backs, buys and sells, and answered some audience questions. We've got more listener questions at the end of this episode. Those came from Twitter/X, so appreciate everybody sending those in. We will, of course, before we get to that, get to our favorite wide receiver buys and sells and also sprinkle in some quarterback and tight end conversation. But first, if you want a chance to win the ultimate symbol of fantasy glory, the Fantasy Football Championship belt, courtesy of our good friends at Trophy Smack, the #1 destination for epic fantasy football hardware, then this is your moment. This massive gold-plated belt is built to make a statement. It's bold, it's heavy, and it's guaranteed to turn heads in your league. Don't just win your championship, wear it. To enter, all you need to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now. Drop a comment below on any of our videos. That's it. We will be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss your chance to claim this championship belt and flex on your entire league. All right, let's go to the wide receivers to buy Erickson. Who was #1 on your list?
Dan Campbell's favorite wide receiver. Jameson Williams, wide receiver for the Detroit Lions. We saw this past week Dan Campbell take a bigger role in terms of play calling for the Lions. He wasn't necessarily loving what John Morton had been doing, or he thought that he could improve upon it, add his own wrinkle to the offense. And I think that resulted in Jameson Williams having one of his best games of the season. 6 of 7 targets for 119 yards and a touchdown, with the majority of his stuff coming in the second half. So in the first half of the game, the Lions could basically do whatever they wanted. It was a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown. It was a lot of Sam Laporta, obviously Jahmyr Gibbs. And in the second half, when they were already kind of in cruise control, it was bombs away. Like let's get Jameson Williams some numbers here. So in a game script that usually is always about, okay, Dave Montgomery's just going to absolutely feast in this spot, it's really more Jameson Williams still being heavily involved, especially as a downfield threat. So Dan Campbell is CEO, president of the Jameson Williams fan club. I think that he absolutely he loves and adores the guy. He's the guy that's been coaching him up and hyping him up the last 2 off seasons. And I know that it's kind of been bumpy in the beginning of the season for Jameson Williams. He's been up and down. I think that this is a really good thing for him, that Dan Campbell did take over the play calling duties. And I think that his usage is going to here to stay. I think he's going to remain an integral part of this offense. And the schedule rest of season for the Detroit Lions, I think is fantastic. So this week is not great. They're playing on the road at Philadelphia. But after this game, they're playing indoors every single week of the season until week 18, which we don't care about because it's outside of the fantasy football postseason. So Jameson Williams, indoors, rest of the way, that's something that I want to buy into, especially if Dan Campbell remains as the play caller, which after they just scored 44 points against the Commanders, I think will probably be the case. So I guess
that's like scoring 25 against a normal team.
True.
Commanders
stink. It's so good. Still good, though. Still good.
They could have scored 60 in that game if they wanted to. I mean,
Probably.
The Commanders' defense is absolutely I mean, it truly might be worse than like the Bengals' defense right now. I mean, it is awful.
The effort levels are definitely at the bottom.
Horrific.
Right now.
Just a heinous performance. Yeah. Jameson Williams is wide receiver 29 in the rest of season rankings. I don't understand why, like, he's behind Garrett Wilson. Wilson is going to miss 3 to 4 weeks. That is like so relevant. At least 3 to 4 weeks, by the way. Like, that's, even if it's just 3 or 4 weeks, that is so relevant this late in the year. That is like the rest of the regular season. I don't get that. Honestly, you could make a case to me that you would rather have Jameson Williams and Brian Thomas Jr. They're back to back in ECR right now. Like, just if Dan Campbell really is going to be calling the plays the rest of the season, I'm with you. I think that is such a huge change for Jameson specifically that, like, I would bump him up a lot, honestly. Like, I think he's borderline into wide receiver 2 territory under Dan Campbell going forward. And you're getting him at a discount right now. It's buying a high because he's coming off of a good game. But I think this is a case where it's smart to buy high and hope that maybe the Jameson Williams manager is looking to sell high and say, hey, he was frustrating for a lot of the year. Like, see if you can. Don't just assume that because you want a guy that his manager wants him too. Like we talked about in the previous, in part 1 of the show, Erickson, how do you get trades done? Ask. Like, how many times have you seen somebody trade a player away and you go, well, I would have traded for him. And the guy's like, well, I didn't know you wanted to. Like, talk. When we're not mind readers, right? Like, go ask. And if they say, no, I want to hold on to Jameson Williams. Okay, you've lost nothing except for a couple seconds of your time. Like, but go ask, because I think this is a great one. I think I think you cannot overemphasize enough how much Dan Campbell likes Jameson Williams and how much of an impact it could have this change at the play caller. Where would you have him ranked rest of season?
I think he'd probably be a top 24 guy for me. And I realize that a lot of his production is not going to be consistent, probably, especially even like this week, right? Week 11 at Philadelphia. Could the Lions lay an egg here? Yeah, I think that's totally possible. But the upside that Williams can offer on a week-to-week basis is what I'm chasing here. I want that extra firepower in my fantasy lineup for the fantasy postseason, because if Jameson Williams goes off for 150 and 2, well, I'm going to be a hard guy to beat in the fantasy postseason that week. And because all they're doing is playing dome games, I think that's always in Jameson Williams' range of outcomes. So yeah, it's always possible that he is boom or bust, but we win with upside, Worm, right? Like Jameson Williams or Alvin Kamara. Who has more upside? It's JMO, right? Yeah, I get that Kamara's going to offer that floor, but the floor is not going to win you anything.
I was going to ask you about a different Saint. Would you rather have Jameson Williams or Chris Olave?
Man, Olave is really hard for me to gauge because I don't think that the ceiling is super, super high. Yes, he caught the long touchdown last week. Does he do that ever again this season? That's what I'm concerned about. So I think I still lean Olave just because I don't think that, his floor is really, really, really high, and he has had a couple spike weeks here and there. But I don't feel great about it. I don't know. Should it be JMO all the way here?
I find that to be they're very close, just in
Tight.
Different ways. So I don't feel strongly about that one. Olave is ranked higher in consensus, but
which I think
close.
Makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's go to another wide receiver to buy, and it's another wide receiver that it's not a buy low. It's somebody who's ranked highly. Well, Jameson Williams isn't ranked highly, but it's another buy high. Jaylen Waddle coming off a wide receiver 1 finish, not wide receiver 1 overall, but he was inside the top 12. 5 catches, 84 yards, and a touchdown last week. Has been getting great work with Tyreek Hill out, and he gets that aforementioned Washington Commanders defense this week. He does have a bye coming up the week after, which again becomes more relevant the later in the season you get. There's fewer weeks to make up for it, but Jaylen Waddle is on your list here.
Yeah, Jaylen Waddle was one of my favorite draft targets this offseason, and it really hasn't played out the way that I thought it would. Obviously, did not consider that Tyreek Hill was going to get injured or that the Miami Dolphins offense would be as dysfunctional as it's been at times. But the last couple weeks, Miami has kind of looked a little bit better, I think, both offensively and defensively. And more importantly, they're winning games, which means Mike McDaniel isn't going to get fired. I feel pretty confident that they beat the Commanders in Spain. That's another win for them. They just beat the Buffalo Bills. McDaniel, I think, is going to be the head coach for the rest of the season. Now, after that, I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do. They already fired the GM. But as long as McDaniel is calling the shots, they have Tua at quarterback, Waddle is a fantasy wide receiver 1. One game this year without Tyreek Hill has he failed to top 82 yards. And it was that one game against Cleveland in bad weather. But 5 of 6 games, he's had at least 82 receiving yards. He's been an absolute monster without Tyreek Hill in the lineup. So you look at the Dolphins' final 8 games. 4 of them are at home. So you're playing in good weather, which I think is ideal for fantasy production. Again, this is a neutral matchup this week, but it's against the Washington Commanders, who basically can't field a defense. Yeah. Sign me up for Jaylen Waddle. And for those that maybe are concerned that Mike McDaniel might get fired or the Miami Dolphins are going to go back to this dysfunctional team, I think they definitely still have that elements of that. And I think that there is still that sentiment that things can kind of get off the rails here, which is why I think Waddle can be acquired still, because I don't know if he's getting the credit enough for how well he's performed without Tyreek Hill this season. So that for me is I just like buying Jaylen Waddle.
Yeah, he has over 80 yards in 5 of his last 6 games.
Yeah.
The Dolphins
Cleveland
have been dysfunctional in a lot of those games, and he has still been giving you a floor. He has at least 11 fantasy points in half PPR in those 5 games. He's been really productive, with a high floor, and he's also giving you a bit of a ceiling. He has 3 wide receiver 1 finishes in that time. He was wide receiver 4, wide receiver 4, wide receiver 11 in 3 of those weeks. So that game at Cleveland, which was horrible weather and just a hideous game, is the only dud since week 4. Since the first month of the season ended, he has been really, really good. So I agree with you. I don't know that he's thought about as much as this top option, but he's wide receiver 10 on the season, despite a slow start. This has been a wide receiver 1 year for Jaylen Waddle, and there's no reason to think that's going away.
No, again, the concern was that they fired McDaniel, they benched Tua, and then Zach Wilson's the quarterback, and then it's a disaster. But because
I just don't think that's happening at this point.
Right. I don't think it's happening anymore because they're starting to win games.
Yeah.
And their schedule is offering them matchups where they can beat their favorite against the Commanders this week. They should win unless, again, it's in Spain. Weird stuff happens in some of these international games, but they can just take advantage of a terrible defense, which McDaniel can't control defense as much because they don't have great personnel, but their defense is playing with much more effort, and McDaniel's still a strong offensive play caller. And against a terrible defense like Washington, yeah, he's going to have Tua throwing the ball effectively. It's just a matter of Tua, his biggest issue is the turnovers, right? Like, that's how they lose this game, is if he just turns the ball over, which he even did against Buffalo. He was turning the ball over. So besides that, I think this offense can at least still be elite for guys that we care about the most, which is Waddle and HN.
I love Waddle. Seems like a strong buy. So does Jameson Williams. I think there's two really good picks by you. You can use the trade analyzer at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or on the Fantasy Pros app to instantly evaluate how any trade will affect your team for this week, the rest of the season, or even in Dynasty. Let's get to the wide receivers to sell. Interesting name here you have first, Erickson, Troy Franklin.
Yes, Troy Franklin, who has been outproducing Courtland Sutton over the last couple weeks. And I think it's been really frustrating for Sutton managers, and I think it's been kind of surprising for those that picked up Troy Franklin off waivers earlier in the season that this guy's been producing at a pretty high level. One of the most insane stats about Troy Franklin this year in terms of his usage is he's right up there with Devontae Adams as the leader in total red zone targets and 2-point conversion attempts. It's bonkers because you look at all the names in terms of red zone targets, you don't think you're going to see the Denver Broncos number 2 wide receiver atop the list, but there he is. And Courtland Sutton is like nowhere to be found, which is just very, very bizarre. But despite that, and the fact that Franklin actually has a 20% target share over the last 6 weeks, which is actually higher than Courtland Sutton's, I think we're going to see this usage start to level out a little bit. I don't think that Sutton has shown this year that he is just like dust or that he's no longer the alpha in the Broncos passing game. Now, to Franklin's credit, he has definitely taken a major step in his second season. But if you just look at straight up points per game, Sutton is still outproducing Troy Franklin in just straight up points per game, despite the fact that Troy Franklin is seeing significantly better usage for fantasy football purposes, whether it's air yards, whether it's the red zone targets that I just mentioned. But Franklin isn't even taking advantage of all these opportunities like he even should be. So he has 4 games with 8+ targets, 4 straight. He has 1 game with more than 40 receiving yards over that span. He scored 4 touchdowns in his last 4 games. Per PFF, Franklin, PFF's 71st graded wide receiver this season. So he's not taking full advantage of all of the opportunities he's seeing, which to me suggests that maybe the Broncos don't focus on hyper-targeting him nearly as much, because when they've been targeting Troy Franklin, yeah, he's been catching touchdowns, but more often than not, it's like not resulting in the greatest play ever. And we saw this last year with Courtland Sutton. First half of the season, kind of started a little bit slower, had that terrible game against the Saints where he had 0 catches, and then second half of the season, him and Bo Nix really started to click, and they went on a tear. So I think that Sutton gets a little bit more involved the rest of the season, which, when you look at the Broncos' schedule, is also much tougher than it was to start the year. They have matchups against the Chiefs, which isn't ideal, Jaguars, Green Bay Packers, another tough matchup against a tough defense. So I think Franklin, to me, it's just a process play where this guy scored a bunch of touchdowns over the last couple weeks. I don't think he's going to be the alpha in the passing game all year long. And I think you can take advantage of those that are looking at the box score where, wow, Troy Franklin's looking pretty good. Like, he's seeing a bunch of targets. Has he taken over as the alpha, which I don't necessarily think will be the case when we finish up the rest of the season with Courtland Sutton probably seeing more volume.
So he's wide receiver 40 in the rest of the season rankings. I think that's probably about fair, honestly. He has a bye week coming. He has Kansas City, then a bye week. But then he does get Washington after that, which is appealing. He gets at KC in week 17, which is, tough for him and the Broncos. I think this probably makes sense. How much do you think you can get? Like, what do you think you would get for Troy Franklin in a trade right now?
I can tell you exactly who you should get with Troy Franklin. His name is Rashid Shaheed. That's who you should get. Okay.
We actually have a question coming up in the listener question segment, just asking if we should be buying low on Shaheed. You would trade Troy Franklin for Shaheed?
Yes, I would do that. The thing with Shaheed, it's really hard to take away a ton of stuff from his first game with the Seahawks because it was 35-0 in the second quarter. So it's really hard to understand what his usage was going to be. But think about this. Shaheed already played the Rams this season. He played the Rams 2 weeks ago. He had a 36% target share in that game against the opponent the Seahawks are playing this week. So there's a bunch of tape about Shaheed against this Rams defense that Clint Kubiak can spend all week in the lab maneuvering and manufacturing touches for Shaheed. I think that this is a monster potential game for Shaheed, and the fact that he bombed in his debut, even though it really wasn't his fault, it was more like the game script. I mean, Sam Darnold threw the ball 12 times. I mean, besides Jackson Smith-Njigba, no wide receiver can really be good when his quarterback throws 12 times. So I think that this is a really sharp move to make, would be flipping Franklin after scoring another touchdown to Shaheed off a meh game. But I think that the trajectory is pointing in completely different directions for these two players.
Okay, so we're buying low on Shaheed. I think that's a good call. I think you could definitely get that done. Let's go to your other wide receiver to sell.
Nico Collins. And this one really, really pains me because I love Nico Collins in draft season, and it's just been not a fun ride for the Houston Texans. Their offensive line has been an issue. CJ Stroud has been banged up. And I think that if you were trying to ship off Collins, because I know I got a bunch of questions about Collins this year, about what I do with Collins, I think this is the time to sell high. He just had a monster game against the Jaguars, 7 for 15 targets, 136 yards. But I want to point out that 54 of those yards came on a Hail Mary attempt at the end of the second half. He has faced Jacksonville twice this year. He has gone over 100 yards both games against the Jaguars. We talked about this on the Rank Show, how this was a really good matchup for him. Like, this is a matchup that he took advantage of when Stroud was healthy. Again, predictably, had a good game. Even without that 50-yard completion, he still would have had a solid game. But I just really concerned about this Texans offensive line rest of season. And when you look at the rest of season schedule for quarterbacks, it is 0 stars in the strength of schedule tool. It's a 0-star rating, dead last among all teams. So the schedule for the Texans, if it's bad for CJ Stroud, it's going to mean it's bad for Nico Collins. So I think that you have to sell high on this opportunity. And it's not to say Nico Collins can't pop off again or have any other good games, but I think that this could be a peak for him just based on how well he's always performing against the Jaguars. And you don't need trade persuade to convince someone, because you can talk about, oh, he's coming off a monster game. CJ Stroud coming back from concussion protocol. He did it with Davis Mills, Worm. Like, Nico Collins, he's back. He's fully back. And I'm just not convinced, because I still think this offensive line is absolutely terrible, and that's not going to be changing anytime soon, even with Stroud coming back. So I think you can still get a decent return for him off a monster game, which is why I would consider selling high.
I was so unbelievably torn in draft season on Nico Collins versus Drake London. I agonized over this. And I was picking in a spot in the first round in a lot of drafts just by happenstance where I had to make that decision. It was like those were the two choices I had at the top of my board. And I did take London in some of them, but I just really feel so much regret for how many of them I took Nico, because I just I had to plant my flag on one of them, and I went with Nico over London. I loved them both, of course, but they were both inside my top 5 or 6 receivers. But yeah, Nico just has not worked out. Who would you be looking to get for him? Because he does have kind of a big name, first round, fantasy draft pick pedigree, coming off a big game. So I think you could maybe get something, even though it's been roughly, a rough year for him. So what do you think is the right kind of name to be asking for?
Can you get Waddle?
I think you probably could.
I think that's because, again, they're both coming off good games. Nico's.
See, this doesn't help me, Erickson, because the league I'm asking about, I have Nico and Waddle. I can't go trade for Waddle. I already have
absorbed too much of my content during this offseason, because that's what all my teams look like, too.
It's our big work. We have this 60-person work. It's like a bunch of leagues split into a bunch of different 16-team leagues. It's like a big deal here at Fantasy Pros. So it's a very deep league, and I do have Nico and Waddle and Egbuka. Actually, I have all 3 of them in that league, which is why I'm doing well. But yeah, I would love to move Nico. I wonder what the right name is. I think Waddle's a good example.
Waddle, and then what about Pickens? You just buy into Dallas offense.
Yeah. Defense maybe a little bit improved to the point where it's not as much of an auto shootout every time. But
look at how good the Texans defense is. They don't play in shootouts really. I mean, this game was such an anomaly about the Texans come back.
I do work. I don't think Pickens is bad. Obviously, he's still been getting 78 plus yards a game. I do wonder if the same level of ceiling is there with with CD back. Like, he's still good, right? Like, I'm not saying Pickens is a bad player, but he's been wide receiver 28, wide receiver 23, wide receiver 29 the last 3 weeks. So it's not like he's had that same crazy ceiling that he did with CD out.
Agreed. But we do know that that ceiling exists where, what if Lamb misses a game, right?
Yeah.
And you have Pickens. Like, the thing is, like, Collins, like, how is Collins going to level up? He can't. Like, he's already the number one. Stroud, even if he comes back, how much he doesn't get to play the Jaguars again this year. Like, that's the other concern. Like, so yeah, I feel like I'm kind of more open to the Pickens thing, even though kind of accepting that with Lamb, it's not nearly as good, but Pickens has still shown like a really high weekly ceiling, which Collins, again, when he's not facing the Jaguars, he really hasn't shown that much this year with Stroud and this terrible Texans offensive line.
What about Ladd?
Yes, definitely would. Definitely want.
They're back to back in ECR.
Yeah, Ladd would be easy. That's one I would definitely do.
I agree with that. Ladd's one spot behind in the rankings, but I agree. I'd rather have Ladd. All right, quarterbacks and tight ends. We always loop these two together. So give me one buy from this position and one sell.
Trey McBride is my buy. Now,
could you call him Trey McBride?
Trey McBride. And obviously, this is going to cost you a lot to get Trey McBride, because he's on fire, and with Jacoby Brissett, the guy cannot stop.
The consensus rest of season number one tight end. Erickson.
Yes.
Erickson is going out on he is putting his reputation on the line, telling you to go acquire Trey McBride.
But I'm saying this because in week 17, he plays the Cincinnati Bengals. Trey McBride may score more points than anyone else in fantasy football in week 17, which is the fantasy football championships. So I'm telling you this as if you were making your fantasy postseason and you were trying to guarantee that I'm going to win the ship this year, you might need to figure out a way to get McBride on your roster, because beating that team or facing that team in the fantasy football playoffs in the championships is going to be really hard to beat them, because he might score 35 points against the Cincinnati Bengals because of how bad they have been against tight ends and how good he has been with Jacoby Brissett. So again, I don't know what type of trade you might have to make. This is probably going to require a running back receiver elite to get McBride, but that's what I would be looking for if I feel good about my postseason. Or this is kind of even like agnostic of like what my tight end situation is. Like, I could have Brock Bowers and I don't care. Like,
that's the thing, right? Like, sorry to cut you off, but like, Bowers for McBride is not going to happen as a trade, because if you have one of those two, you're not moving them, and you're not going to be able to move a lower tight end for him. So if you were trading for McBride, it's not going to come from tight end. It's going to have to come from wide receiver or running back.
Yeah, and I guess for me, it's he should be viewed, because of this one matchup, in the similar tiers of almost all the top end elite players, where I'm talking about, like, I mean, we talked about Bijan Robinson as like a buy low running back. I mean, you might have to use Bijan as a chip to get, I mean, you want to see someone I would make a trade for. If I had to move Bijan to get Trey McBride in some type of deal, I would do that. Because I just think that McBride, what he can do in week 17 is so high, and how much that matters for you to win.
Well, and by the way, it's not just week 17. He has been tight end 2, tight end 3, tight end 6, tight end 1. The last 4 weeks that he's played, there was a bye week mix in there, but the last 4 games he's played, 17 points, 24 points, 14 points, 23 points. He's already been playing at an elite level.
Yeah. So yeah, he also is not just about week 17, but I'm trying to put the emphasis on that. And maybe that's a reason why maybe you kind of overspend.
What if Kyler's back in week 17? Are you going to feel a lot worse about it?
I'll be gutted.
Yeah. All right. So Trey McBride, obviously we love him, but love him even more than you might have guessed is the point here. Buy high on Trey McBride. Trey McBuy. Sell, you have Caleb Williams here.
Yes, I do have Caleb Williams, and the reason is the last 2 matchups have been really favorable for him. He's faced the Cincinnati Bengals and the New York Giants, 2 of the softer matchups in the NFL for quarterbacks. The rest of the schedule this season is not good for him. This week 11, he's playing on the road against the Minnesota Vikings against Brian Flores. That can be a tough defense for young quarterbacks. And Caleb Williams has been really up and down this year. Sometimes he's looked like he's taking the next step. Other times it looks like he has no idea what he's doing. So if we're getting more up and down play and he's not making as many plays with his legs, that concerns me about what his actual ceiling is going to be coming off just 2 really soft matchups. He also has to play the Packers twice, which is also really, really tough. So I think that Caleb Williams is someone that I would look to sell high on if I'm at my fantasy quarterback position.
He still does not have a game this season where he has finished between QB 10 and 20. He has either been inside the top 10 or outside the top 20 in every week this season. Very much up or down. Caleb is QB 14 in rest of season rankings. I think that's probably about right. If you had to guess that he finishes higher or lower than that the rest of the way, like from here at this point on out, it sounds like you would guess that he finishes lower than that.
Yeah. I would probably take the under on him finishing that way just because the schedule is really tough. And we know that with fantasy quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Yes, he does have the rushing, which I think will always kind of offer him something. But
well, except for it hasn't offered him something. He has 4 games this season where hasn't been inside the top 20. So like, even though he has the rushing, it has not always lifted his floor.
True. So yeah, that's what concerns me about him rest of season.
Yeah. All right, let's get to some audience questions here. We'll go quickly through these and we'll get out of here. This question comes from Ryan on Instagram, actually. Thanks for the question, Ryan. Travion Henderson for Jordan Addison. It's in half PPR. Also has Javonte, Vidal, and Marks on the running back side, and has London, Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., and Parker Washington on the receiver side. Again, he has Javonte, Vidal, and Marks. He has London, Odunze, Harrison Jr., and Parker Washington. Would you trade Travion Henderson to add Addison?
No. Do not trade Travion Henderson. Do not trade away a league winner when he's in your lap, guys. Don't do it.
Okay. When I wrote this down, I think he's trading away Henderson. I don't remember off the top of my head if I wrote that down right. So if you're trading for Henderson, do it. If you're trading away Henderson, do not do that, Ryan. Next question here. This person has Sutton, Teteroa, McMillan, and Shakir. Is there a package they can make between those to upgrade?
Yeah, this is a tough one because you're trying to sell a bunch of ponies, try to get a horse, which sometimes can work in some of these. If you need depth.
I don't think Shakir is going to be a part of this. I think if you're doing this, it's going to have to be Sutton and McMillan. What can you get for those two packaged?
Waddle. He is one of my favorite wide receiver targets. Waddle would be one that I would look to target.
What about Higgins? Is that enough of an upgrade?
I think the ceiling for Higgins just on a weekly basis with Flacco/Burrow is way higher than it's been with. I mean, I love T-Mac, but it's just it's hard to get there with the. I mean, his rookie year it reminds me so much of Drake London's rookie year, where every week the guy just puts up like alpha target share numbers, but then you look at the box score, 5 for 32, just not impressed by the We'll be screaming for T-Mac next year for sure because his usage is off the charts, but until we get any type of just more passing from the Panthers, which they just don't want to do with Bryce Young right now. It's really more about focusing on Rico Dowdle. Again, I think T-Mac is fine with this floor, but Higgins has a really, really high ceiling on a weekly basis. So I think that's a good name to drop as well.
Ladd's another one I'd try for. I mean, he's wide receiver 9 in points per game since week 5. Like he's been really good if you can try for that. But yeah, I would try McMillan and Sutton and see what you can get for those two. Don't bother with Shakir. That's not gonna make a difference. Would you sell high on Olave, and also would you buy low on Diggs?
Yes and yes. I guess I didn't think that Diggs was a buy low really because he caught a touchdown last week. That touchdown catch was sick. It is so much fun watching Stephon Diggs be good again. Man, that dude has been a monster for the Patriots this season. So, I think that Olave, I think that this is a really high ceiling game for him. But when you have a rookie quarterback, we know the floor can sometimes crumble. So I would definitely trade Olave for Diggs.
2 more here quickly, Erickson. Is DK a worthy trade target?
Yes, because they have a really good schedule rest of season for wide receivers. He is the alpha in the Steelers passing game. And over the last 2 weeks, I know it's been frustrating, but I mean, he's had opportunities for touchdowns and big plays, but Rodgers has just missed them. So I think that Metcalf eventually gets back into production.
Last one. Give me a must-have wide receiver for the playoffs.
Must-have wide receiver for the playoffs. It's Jaylen Waddle. It's Jaylen Waddle program, folks. Just
Waddle
playing
season.
The hits.
All right, Jaylen Waddle. We'll stick with that. We'll go ahead and wrap things up there. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Again, next week, if you have specific trade questions, is the last week to get them in. Is last week. We'll have this iteration of the show. We will still have the show going forward after that. It'll just look a little bit differently post the fantasy trade deadline. So be sure to get those questions in ahead of next week. For Erickson, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Best of luck this week. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Do the Waddle.